The past of St. Thomas is a glorious one as part of the history of Sioux City and of the Episcopal Church in this general area.
The young Reverend Hoyt and his family traveled to the frontier town of Sioux City in the summer of 1858. By fall of the same year, St. Thomas Episcopal Church was formed, becoming the first organized denomination in Sioux City. It was a humble wood-frame at the cost of $1,550, which included the land. During those early and difficult years, the congregation slowly grew, and plans were underway to build a much larger church. It would be built at the corner of 12th and Douglas Streets, overlooking the growing city. Its cornerstone was laid on August 12, 1891. A rectory was needed for the grand church, and Miss Mary Drew Peavy donated her residence to use as a rectory and parish house in 1908. It was one of the finest residences in the city at that time, and the present-day parish house was built on the site in 1960.
The old parish house was a very big, stately, three-level, almost you could say mansion. It had a wraparound porch. The yard has loaded with lilac bushes and flowers and mulberry bushes, and it was just a wonderful place to come.
In 1910, an old robing room was converted into an intimate chapel in memory of George and Mary Ware, who were very active in St. Thomas's early years. The chapel remains a place of quiet reflection and prayer, and is home to some of St. Thomas's exquisite needlework. The concept and designs depict the history of St. Thomas and its place in the Anglican community.
It initially started with one chair in the chapel, and then it led to the priest chairs around, and the group of women just the job was never quite done. And the people who designed those cushions were actually Episcopalians too, but not members of our church. One of them was the Reverend Gary Fromm, who was at Calvary.
Now, the one cushion that I did for the chapel took me 2 years. And then in the sanctuary, I did a big cushion for one of the big chairs there. But we had a large group of doing it. Back in those days, it was a art craft that we were all involved in.
The flowers are the colors in the Bible, and the music actually is the Te Deum. And they all have a wonderful history and a story that goes with all of them.
During the years of growth and prosperity, St. Thomas was alive with countless events and activities.
I can't remember when Mother wasn't active in St. Margaret's Guild, and then of course we girls came along. And in 1952 I was selected to be, I think they called us president.
When we were looking through the pictures, my grandfather was the King of Mardi Gras in 1937.
I think Father Gregory was here by that time, and the Mardi Gras was out at Shore Acres, which was still a ballroom. I think that was the year my daughter was a page. She was 5 years old, so that would make it about 58, I suppose.
My father and my mother were still living, and they decided they would have the Thorpe window out here, which is a series of 3 windows in the north wall there of the vestibule. And it refers to the 3 generations of the Thorpe family.
Came to St. Thomas in August of 1960. I came as the football coach at Central. That's how I can tie it down to a specific date. And since that time, this is the only church we've attended in Sioux City. The one who was here when I came here, and that was Father Joe Gregory. And he was, of course, from Spain and had a tremendous accent. But he was very, very active in the community, and he got a lot of other men in the church active in the community.
Remember that there was a nursery school here. We had the most wonderful teachers, Colleen Butler and Polly Jones. They were just the greatest teachers, and you just knew your child was going to be ready for kindergarten once they left, the St. Thomas school.
Darrell Stahl back in the late 70s. Daryl became a good friend of mine, and I was a running companion with Daryl. And he brought me back into the church, and I got very involved in it and loved it, and really started to understand what this God and church and Christ was all about. And now have become very involved in men's Bible study, which meets on Tuesday mornings and has for the last 10 years.
When Verdry Kerr was here, we always had him involved in the kitchen duties when we had our Shrove Tuesday pancake suppers, and got him on the griddle and made sure that he was in the kitchen where he was very uncomfortable, I think. But we did a lot of those kinds of activities, and they were so much fun.
While reflecting on its past, the congregation began looking toward its future and undertook a massive restoration project in 1979. It would be spearheaded by Howard Trevelyan, the renowned architect in residence for the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C.
As I recall, my dad was on the vestry often and was the senior warden a number of times. And maybe his biggest leadership contribution was the renovation of the church. So he headed up that committee.
We wanted to do a pilot program so that the parish could get excited about what restoration would do. And that's why we did the Weir Chapel first. And from that Weir Chapel, we had some seed money, and we spent the money to make it like the architect wanted. We carried that forward and went through the rest of the church.
A lot of the woodwork was damaged, just over years. Maybe nicks, maybe pieces of it gone, and we were so fortunate to have in this community carpenters who could repair that, make something new that exactly matched what had been there before. A rather large project was putting all of this tile in the sanctuary area. That had been carpeted over, but at one point in time there was tile up in that area. Also, the narthex of the church, I think, was carpeted at the time, and we put slate back in.
Before the renovation, it was sort of a dark mahogany look, and just the whole look of the church was very dark. And this brought more light in, and I think made it more elegant too.
It's a beautiful building, and I think I appreciate it more when I visit other churches. I've seen a lot of the beautiful cathedrals and such in Europe, and I think that St. Thomas has some of that same sense of history and architecture.
Well, I love the beauty of the church. This is where, from this church, my parents were buried, and my brother and my son. And those are all very important things to me. The beauty of the church is wonderful. It's exquisite, it really is. I love the stained glass windows. I love our altar. I love everything about it, I guess. But of course, I was raised in this church. I've seen others. I admire them to some extent, but this is the one.
Through the years, St. Thomas has welcomed those in search of a spiritual home.
When I walked in this church the first time, with all of my baggage, my crap and my mistakes and all those conditions that I had, I was welcomed with open arms.
We came here and started looking at churches, and actually came to St. Thomas on Christmas Eve, and walked in, and while we were here for the Christmas Eve service, Santa came and did a little sermon with the priest in charge at the time, Verdry Kerr. My kids were like, we have to go to that church. Santa goes to that church. And so that was one of the reasons we kind of started coming here.
I think we came to St. Thomas primarily because my wife now and I were looking for a place to call our church home as we entered a new marriage for each of us. She came from a Roman Catholic tradition, had been there for a few years, and I'd been Lutheran throughout most of my conscious adult life, and it seemed like a good compromise to us, just in terms of the theology and the liturgy that's offered here. And we came through the doors one Sunday morning in early 2000, kind of sizing the place up to see whether it would feel comfortable to us. And I know that the priest here at that time, Mary Christopher, thought we were just out shopping for a beautiful church to have a wedding in, and we'd be moving on shortly after that. And I think we proved her wrong fairly quickly, because we got to be pretty involved very, very soon.
I came to St. Thomas actually to work in the office in 1993. Jean Conley was the parish administrator at that time. She encouraged me to come to church one morning so that I could understand how a bulletin went together, you know, what all that Episcopalian stuff meant. So I came to church with her just so I could understand my job better, and immediately fell in love with the liturgy and the atmosphere of the church, and shortly thereafter became a member.
My grandmother and parents were Methodist, and started coming here with a neighbor of mine across the street, and I guess superficially I fell in love with the church itself and how beautiful it was.
First time my husband and I walked into this church for a service, it was practically full to overflowing. And as you say, it's a beautiful, beautiful church. And it is a most awe-inspiring experience. You can't help but be worshipful. It's breathtaking.
Probably over 20 years ago, I was not attending church at all, and I had small children, and there was a book study here. The priest and his wife brought a secular author here, and I was much impressed by that, and I came for the weekend to listen to that and became curious about the kind of church where the intellect wasn't left out, and haven't stopped coming since. Well, it was 9 years ago that I was ordained, and probably 15 to 19 years before that I first started sensing a call to ordain ministry in the diaconate specifically. And I don't know that I could tell you one thing that started. It was a combination of the presence of God in this place and the role of the diaconate in Iowa, the Diocese of Iowa, meeting someone from the Roman Catholic Church who was a deacon and understanding that vocation better. So it was just an evolution of things and a discernment over a number of years.
Mom, I believe, taught Sunday school and was always helping out with the kid programs. And then as she moved along on her own journey, ultimately she became ordained as an Episcopal deacon. And that was a huge event. So that happened here. And I remember her talking about when the bishop laid hands on her, it's like something went right through her and time stopped. And she knew this is where she was supposed to be. It sounded very powerful.
I do find sacredness in this building, and I almost hesitate to say that because as a deacon I talk so much about the church really needs to be in the world, that we only do something here to give us that energy and that connection with God to then go out and do the rest of the work in the world. So I find it ironic I say that to you, but there is just something very sacred about this space and this building. And I suppose that too is 20 years of community and experience, realizing the Holy Spirit here that makes up the stone and the artwork and the windows. So.